Lord forgive me for this trap shit. Sergeant Smack make it backflip. Telly Hank did with the action. With the vital speaking Spanish. Frank Matthews how I vanish. Poof. Came back like I'm King Tut. Gold BBS is on a beamer. When Fat Cat was 10 queens up. Ball off the profit, not the re-up. Fly like Puerto Rican Jesus. Uptown like I'm Baby Maine. Just caught a touchdown from the bay.
Court records show Newberry was charged in a 2014 robbery and murder. That case was dismissed. Today, East Cleveland police said other departments have come forward with information connecting the 23-year-old to at least one other robbery and killing.
There's some pretty direct evidence that indicates that Mr. Newberry has done this before, and that this is sort of his operation.
Two local stories that until today had no connection. Tonight, they're woven together by murder. First, in January.
This might be our victim over here.
You're on the front line of a police call. Body cam shows quick response when a man near the Cleveland-Euclid line was shot 16 times pulling out of his driveway. A delayed response by local EMS gave the story national attention. Because he was a victim, his name was not widely reported. Tonight, Ronald Newberry is both healed and wanted.
Last January, police officers saved Ronald Newberry's life, rushing him to the hospital after he was shot 16 times pulling out of a driveway. Now detectives believe Newberry was on the other side of last month's deadly attack that killed 39-year-old Paul Bradley and his 14-year-old daughter, Paris.
That Mr. Newberry and his associates, we believe that there are multiple people involved in this. Mr. Newberry and his associates knew Paul through a third source, third person, female, and we believe that essentially either she took an active role in conspiring or just gave information to Mr. Newberry relative to Paul having a lot of money. So we believe that that was the motive.
Probably one of the most heinous homicides I've been involved with.
Police say he came here to the Bedford home of Paul Bradley, a target because they were involved with the same woman for a time. Things escalated and Bradley's daughter Paris became a target, killed, investigators say, in front of her father.
New details on the two burned bodies found in a car in East Cleveland earlier this week. They have now been identified as Paul Bradley and his 14-year-old daughter Paris. Our Ray Strickland is live at the East Cleveland Police Department with what else we are learning. Certainly a difficult story tonight, Ray.
And Drew, to be honest, the more we know about this, the more heartbreaking it gets. The 14-year-old girl, Paris, we've learned was a freshman student at Bedford High School. She was loved by all of her classmates, and of course, all of them are shocked by what happened. Her father, we spoke to a next-door neighbor who lived next door to him, and he says that her father was a good man and a good neighbor, and he says no one deserves what happened to them. But Paul Bradley and his daughter, Paris, their bodies were found in that burned car on Wednesday morning in East Cleveland. That same day, police hours later were searching a home in Bedford. We learned then it was Bradley's house and that he had rented the car him and his daughter were discovered in. Now, at this hour, police confirming details on what happened before they were found miles away in Bedford. Police tell us the father and daughter, were forced from their beds. We've been told Paris was tortured and her father's hands and feet were tied up. Investigators also say her father was alive at the time when the car was set on fire. Paris, they say, was likely already dead. We spoke to a next-door neighbor who got choked up about the news.
You know, horrible, horrible. Me and my wife couldn't sleep all night because just thinking about the girl. It, you know, broke us up.
And it was next door.
Next door, next door. It's tragic.
As you would imagine, the community is taking this hard. Parents of friends of the little girl, they're really concerned about what happened. Police, they're continuing to work on who did this to them, but so far no suspects have been arrested. Drew.
It's just awful. What are they doing to incentivize people to come forward, Ray?
So police, they want people to come forward. They encourage them to come forward. And we know right now that Crime Stoppers is offering a $2,500 reward. And also the Blue Ribbon Committee is offering a $5,000 reward. So police are encouraging you. If you have any information, you at home, please give them a call.
Let's hope someone speaks up.
Detectives call it one of the worst crimes they've ever worked. A 14-year-old girl tortured, then shot in front of her father.
That father then burned alive with his daughter in the car. Tonight, investigators say this is the face of one of the men responsible right there. And now the search is on for the 23-year-old man. 5 on your side investigator Scott Knoll live outside the East Cleveland Police Department with the latest.
Murder charges were filed here this morning. The suspect, a guy with a violent past. Last January, police officers saved Ronald Newberry's life, rushing him to the hospital after he was shot 16 times pulling out of a driveway. Now detectives believe Newberry was on the other side of last month's deadly attack that killed 39-year-old Paul Bradley and his 14-year-old daughter, Paris.
I mean, the fact that you would torture a 14-year-old girl, shoot her 3 times in the head, by all evidence indication, Paris was shot while Paul was still alive, and Paul was burnt alive. That takes a peculiar personality to do that.
Investigators say surveillance video showed Newberry's Ford Edge driving to the abandoned lot and speeding away from the spot where Bradley's rental car was found burning with the bodies inside. The deadly end, what police believe started as a plan to rob Bradley.
You know, the victim was pretty well off financially, and Mr. Newberry and his associates were aware of his financial status.
Police say Bradley's Bedford home was ransacked and items missing. They say it was also doused in gasoline. So much so, detectives hope it could help them ID others involved.
Somebody had to have seen it. I mean, there was an extraordinary amount of gasoline that was used on this crime. They had to have stopped somewhere and filled up multiple gas cans.
Court records show Newberry was charged in a 2014 robbery and murder. That case was dismissed. Today, East Cleveland police said other departments have come forward with information connecting the 23-year-old to at least one other robbery and killing.
You know, there's some pretty direct evidence that indicates that Mr. Newberry has done this before, and that this is sort of his operation.
Police here believe they have that getaway car caught on video. They say Newberry actually took it back to the dealership where he bought it a couple of weeks ago, complaining the radio didn't work. Live in East Cleveland, I'm 5 on your side investigator Scott Knoll.
In 1998, Jay-Z would drop a project titled The Streets Is Watching. A few years after that, he would also release a song called The Streets Is Talking, featuring Beanie Siegel. Now, if you haven't heard any of those songs, this is gonna tell you exactly what they was talking about. We back in Ohio with it. Cleveland, what up though? Now, during my time on this earth, I only happened to meet one person from the city of Cleveland. And by the way they described the city, I knew exactly what kind of situation it was. And the thing about it, years and possibly decades later, I don't really remember much of the conversation. For real, I barely remember the person. But one thing I do remember is when talking about his own city, he never called it Cleveland. He always called it Thieveland. Now, that shit stuck with me. And when doing my research for this episode on Ronald Newberry, he definitely struck me as a person that was from that same city that he described. But even in a city as wild as Cleveland, a crime that would occur on October 10th, 2018 would stand out as overly treacherous, or as one of the detectives investigating would call it, barbaric. But what makes the death of Paul Bradley and his 14-year-old daughter Paris even more treacherous is the people that committed the crime possibly only got a designer belt, a PlayStation 4, and a wristwatch. Now, this plan would be hatched on October the 9th when Ronald Newberry would call a friend of his by the name of Cody Gibson to rob Paul Bradley. Now, this is where the streets is watching and the streets is talking shit come into play, because it's never stated definitively how they knew Paul Bradley had money. I read somewhere where they said it was a known fact, but what sounds way more convincing to me is what the detective said earlier, where he would say Ronald Newberry would get the information from a female that both men have been dating. Now, for my guys tuned in, while I give my definition of pillow talking, I want y'all to get in the comment box with y'all's, just in case that was the situation. Pillow talking, a verb. Maybe it might be a noun. To divulge an unidentified amount of information about oneself prior, during, or after sexual relations with a female. Now, this act could be detrimental in a multitude of reasons, but I'm going to go through two. One, most females talk too much. A lot of these dudes too, so y'all females watch out. And number two, females are extremely bitter. Cause tune into this. What do you think she's gonna do when she thinks she's the only one and she run your phone and she see that she's number 4 of 20 and you told her that you have 4 bricks in the basement, or you was on the run from a murder in Tallahassee, or any of that stupid kind of shit? So whether or not, if that's how Ronald Newberry got his information, Paul Bradley was a lick. And according to Jack Casino records, it showed that Paul Bradley gambled more than $3 million at Jack Casinos in the previous 3 years. His girlfriend would even testify at court that gambling was Bradley's main source of income, even testifying that a few weeks prior to the shooting, Bradley would call her to meet him at a motel on Independence, and he would give her a duffel bag full of $345,000 in cash. She would say that Ohio State troopers would pull her over and seize the money. Now, I don't know if I believe all that, but she would also testify that Bradley wasn't even upset about losing all of that cash. Ronald Newberry, Cody Gibson, and another accomplice, DeMarcus Shealy, would drive to Paul Bradley's house on Guild Avenue in October of 2010 to carry out the robbery. When they would arrive to the destination, they would see 14-year-old Paris Bradley going to a car that was parked in the driveway to grab a book bag. But even seeing that didn't change their plans. And they would leave and come back to the house. A few hours later, the trio would go back to the house where they would assist Cody Gibson in getting into one of the windows where he would let the other 2 in. During trial, it was said that the trio would ransack the basement before heading upstairs to the basement where Paul and Paris Bradley would lay asleep. Paul would be beaten out of sleep with the men requesting money. Eventually, the group would kidnap the two, placing Paul Bradley in his Buick, while Paris Bradley would ride with DeMarcus Shealy to an abandoned house in East Cleveland. When they would arrive, it was said that they would torture the 14-year-old in front of her father in the efforts to try to get him to divulge where his stash of money was, ending with them shooting the 14-year-old in front of her father, then putting him in his Buick and lighting it on fire while he was alive. And in an act that would probably call for the death penalty, Ronald Newberry would end up being sentenced to 65 years, with Cody Gibson receiving 50. But the family of Paul and Paris Bradley would be outraged when the alleged shooter of 14-year-old Paris Bradley, DeMarcus Shealy, would only be sentenced to 15 years behind bars. And the family of Paul and Paris Bradley would erupt at the sentencing for DeMarcus Shealy when Paul Bradley's girlfriend would state that he had 39 good years on this earth, with the 28-year-old DeMarcus Shealy replying, "I'll be back when I'm 39. Now, y'all never say I ain't tell y'all about Cleveland. Y'all make sure y'all hit the red subscribe button and that bell right under this video so y'all know when this real Trill Spill shit is dropping. Y'all get in the comment box, y'all flooded. Y'all please let these people know what the definition of pillow talking is. Don't be bragging to get no kitty and get your ass tucked in. Y'all tapping with me directly. Instagram, Twitter, POP_A_LOT. We gonna be back before you know it. Cleveland, appreciate y'all rolling out the red carpet. Shit got Popalot. Salute the almighty MOBB.